رحمة الإسلام والصلاة والسلام على خير الأنام وعلى آله وأصحابه الكرام أما بعد. قال النبي وقال أيضا في رواية فروا من الأسد فرارك من الأسد. Just to start with the coronavirus. So as you mentioned it, there's a hadith where the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, La adwa wala tayrata wala safarata. He talks about other things in Islam in Sahih al-Bukhari, which means adwa in when you talk in medicine, in tib, what it means is there's no transmission of disease in Islam. There's no such thing as a transmission of disease. So if I'm ill, I can't afflict another person. In another riwayah, so in this hadith he talks about adwa and he talks about tayrat as well, which is this superstitious thing they had about birds. You know, if the bird goes this way, then it's good. If it goes that way, it's bad. Superstition. And there's other hadith where كان رسول الله كان أهل الجاهلية يتطيرون, that the people of Jahiliyyah used to do this.
They took omens from birds.
They took omens from birds. You know, if a bird goes this way, good news. That way, bad news. Let's see what's going to happen in the future. So this was discouraged. This hadith, Rawahul Hakim, Sahihul Isnad, right? And this is another discussion I'll mention about Sahihul Isnad when it says the chain is authentic. So this hadith we're talking about, the chain is authentic, but the hadith scholar doesn't say this hadith is authentic. So I'll talk about that in a second. First, about this hadith where he said there is no transmission of disease, and in another hadith he said, when flee from a leper, this person with this disease, like you flee from a lion.
Or I've heard another hadith where people of the disease should not go to the other city.
Yeah, so this is in the ta'un, when they had the plague.
Yeah, plague, yes.
When they had the plague. So this is another hadith as well. But doesn't it go against the first hadith
kind of
that we mentioned? So this is a bit of, and especially with the coronavirus going on. Yesterday, actually, in A&E, Brighton A&E, about 4 o'clock, this guy comes into reception, coughing, short of breath, and they triage a person when they first come in. So he just come back from central China. And they told him to go out in the car park, and they had a whole protocol. Everyone was going crazy. They had a whole protocol of so in the A&E, in the back in the miners room, they have all these different rooms. So room 4 and 5, you see when you go there, that's a special room if there's any epidemic diseases. So they go there and they had to isolate him, no entry on the door. And the nurse, who's specially trained for this sort of thing, said, I'm immunosuppressed, I can't go in. So she had to get in. She goes, I can't go in myself, but I can get someone else who I can talk them through it. So this other doctor came and he's like, yeah, I'll go in. So he goes, he has to wear the full, the full gear.
Yeah.
Right. And then he goes in, he clocks the guy, comes out, and I'm in the in the back room as well, doing something else. And he just dashes the notes there. And it says the history. And I'm thinking this notes has just been in the virus room. La adwa fil Islam.
So you tested negative?
No, so we don't know. I went home at 5 o'clock, so I don't know what happened to the guy. This is one of they had to phone the big bosses as well. They had to phone the bosses, and they had to call the infectious disease consultant who's not on shift usually at that time. They had to call him and all that. So, and I was taking bloods from another guy. So he was a professor, 80-year-old bichara, and I was taking bloods from him, and I go, what are you a professor of? Guess what he said? China studies. And he goes, don't worry. And this is the middle, I stopped. And he goes, don't worry. I've not come back from China anytime soon. So, but there's obviously people have started to trivialize the disease. Disease is a big thing in Islam.
So what about this hadith?
Yeah, okay. So the hadith, is it contradicting or is it not contradicting? So la adwa fil Islam, disease doesn't transmit, but at the same time the Prophet ﷺ says, run from the leper like you run from a lion. And in other hadith says, don't go to the part where there's plague, ta'un. So how do we reconcile between as Muslims?
Maybe the understanding of transmission.
How do you reconcile between the hadith? Yeah.
Allah decides who gets the virus.
Yeah, this is how the scholars generally understood it. Scholars understood it by saying that there is no transmission of the disease except with the taqdeer of Allah. So if Allah wants it to be transmitted, it will be transmitted. That's how the scholars generally understood this hadith. So then it doesn't go against the second hadith. So obviously, if someone is in like quarantine, you shouldn't go to that area because you might catch the plague, and these sort of things. We know in our modern science that viruses do transmit. Coronavirus, you can't get it, so be a bit cautious. This sort of thing. But again, like you said, people sort of trivialize these things. The coronavirus. And even the meeting the other day, I was in the meeting with the surgeons. One of them coughed, and someone else goes, "When did you come back from China?" So even though we trivialize it, it's been transmitted to us by the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam that it's a serious thing. He said, run from the leper like you run from a lion. That's how eager you should be to not catch the disease and make it not spread, kind of thing. So that was that coronavirus. But the hadith going against each other, we mentioned the way we understood that. Now, I think last time we just spoke about the Muqtadi narration, and then now it's just like an overview of things we've already talked about. Hadith Qudsi, the difference between that and the Quran, we spoke about what the difference is.
We're reciting.
This comes through.
Yeah, Qudsi, from the words of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but the meaning from Allah. And can a Hadith Qudsi be da'if?
No.
Yes, it can be. Hadith Qudsi can be da'if, or Quran can't be da'if. That's another. Quran has to be mutawatir, has to be mass transmitted ayah of the Quran, because if you object to something that's mass transmitted, it's like you're objecting to something that's been proven, hence you're not going to be in the fold of Islam. If you know that it's been transmitted from Allah and you're still objecting to it, then that's bad. But if it's something that's less authentic, you can say, okay, it's not completely authentic, that's why I disagree with it for reasons. But with the ayah of the Quran, you can't disagree with it. And then I give you examples of that. Then we went to the Hadith Marfu. Hadith Marfu, the elevated Hadith, which is?
It's the one that ascribed to the Messenger of Allah.
Ascribed to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Hadith Marfu is when it's saying an action, an approval, or characteristics of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then Hadith Mawquf. What's Hadith Mawquf?
Sahaba.
A saying of the companions. We know this is Hadith Mawquf. Then we move on to Hadith Maqtoo. Did we talk about Hadith Maqtoo last time? Okay, I think we start from there then.
Yeah, I know. No, I'm sure I did.
Okay. Hadith.
No, I'm not demanding. Please send.
Hadith Maqtoo. So Hadith Maqtoo is a severed hadith. The severed hadith means there's a break in the chain. أما أضيف إلى التابعي أو من دونه من دونه من قول أو فعل. So what's ascribed to a tabi'i? So someone who's not a sahabi, the third stage. Or someone who's further on than him, and this Hadith Maqtoo. So Hadith Maqtoo is connected to a tabi'i. So al-Maqtoo is not the same as Munqati', because Maqtoo is from the qualities of the matan, so actual text of hadith, and Munqati' is a quality of the sanad. So a Hadith Maqtoo is the saying of a tabi'i or someone who came after him. Saying of the Messenger's hadith, marfu. Saying of a sahabi is hadith, mawquf. And saying of a tabi'i is hadith, maqtu'. And the saying of someone who came after him is also maqtu' hadith. It's different between munqati' hadith is something different. Hadith munqati' is something different. Hadith munqati' is a quality of the matan. Okay. And it says here أن الحديث المكتوب من كلام التابعي فمن دونه وقد يكون السند متصلا إلى ذلك التابعي على حين أن المنقطع يعني أن إسناد ذلك الحديث غير متصل ولا تعلق له بالمتن. There's no connection with the matan. The matan is okay, but it's the chain of the narration. And the example given is مثال المقطوع القولي قول الحسن البصري في الصلاة خلف المبتدئ صلي وعليه بدعته. So it's, for example, Hadith Hassan Basri, who is what? A Sahabi? A Tabi'i. And I said last time, remember you asked me about Maulana. I was correct. I sent you the sanad in the group. I think, I can't remember if I did or not, but I was thinking about sending it to you guys.
Yeah, you did.
I sent it. Basically, Hassan Basri, he was called by Anas ibn Malik Maulana. So Anas ibn Malik, the Sahabi, called Hassan Basri Maulana. So this was, I was correct last time. It was that way, not the other way around. So Hassan Basri said regarding prayer behind someone who is an innovator, he said regarding prayer behind someone who is an innovator, that pray behind him and upon him is his bid'ah, right? Meaning you can pray. Yeah. وَنَرَى الصَّلَاةَ it's in Aqidah as well. وَنَرَى الصَّلَاةَ خَلْفَ كُلِّ بَرٍّ وَفَاجِرٍ, that we pray behind every pious person, every sinning person. It's not to do with us. And that's why, Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, the Sahabi, would pray behind him, even though he was a tyrant, really bad guy. So this is Hadith Maqtoo. Why? Who said this hadith? Hassan Basri, who was a Tabi'i. Maqtoo fi'li is qawl Ibrahim ibn Muhammad ibn Muntashir. So Ibrahim ibn Muhammad ibn Muntashir said, كان مسروق يرخي الستر بينه وبين أهله ويقبل على صلاته ويخليهم ودنياهم. So talking about Masruq and what he used to do. So when he's talking about action of a tabi'i, it's also maqtu fi'li. So you can't prove something from the Sharia by Hadith Maqtoo because it came after Islam. So the tabi'i went there when the Quran was revealed, so you can't prove anything from them in that sense. Hukm Shari'i. Even if it's authentically narrated from them, because it's a comment of a single Muslim and the action of a single Muslim. But if there is a reason why this is ascribed to the Prophet, then we will act upon them. For example, if the Tabi'i himself said this is elevated to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this will be an example of marfu'
so
but
mursal.
mursal.
They have experienced that.
Sorry?
A particular action or an incident.
Yeah. So for example, they might do something. So someone else is describing. So you're a Tabi'i. Someone else is describing you pray 2 rakats before Dhuhr, for example.
Yeah.
And then later on you say I pray because the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed it. So this is an incident, maqtu incident. But you say the ruling on this is like a marfu, because you said this is from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But then it all goes back to who said it. Are you one of the kibar of the tabi'in? Are you sahih in terms of who you are? Do you have a chain back to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam? All these,
but we would anyway have complementary.
Yeah, we would have a complementary hadith.
So we don't need to really look at these.
Yeah, we don't need to, but it's just if it's there, then what do we say about it? So categorizing every different narration. So yeah. So sometimes the muhaddithin, for example, Shafi'i and Tabarani used to say maqtu, and by maqtu they mean munqati, which means that the chain is severed, it doesn't reach the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but this is not a famous term. But Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, it can be ascribed to him that he said this. He used to say maqtu and he meant munqati because the science of usul al-hadith wasn't so formulated by then. So this is why the scholars excuse him. And why At-Tabarani used to say, because he was around after the formulation of Isnad, he said it so to say it's permissible to call this maqtu munqati. This is just because he said some people use it. For example, Shafi'i uses it, and
Can you give an example of maqtu hadith?
A maqtu hadith. Yeah. A maqtu hadith is, for example, masruq. They give 2 examples already. Are you talking about the munqati?
Yeah, the one.
Munqati. Okay.
Yeah.
Maqtu means severed as well. Munqati means incomplete as well. Munqati is when, for example, Ahmed says the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this. Long time later, someone Munqati. Maqtoo is when a tabi'i does something or says something. A hadith about him is called a maqtoo.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the difference. Again, a lot of places where mawquf, maqtoo narrations are gathered are Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shayba, the Musannaf of Abdul Razak, and the Tafasir of Ibn Jarir and Ibn Abi Hatim al-Munzir. So now we go on to Hadith Musnad. We've done these before as well. Hadith Musnad. Okay, Hadith Musnad means to ascribe, and in the Mustalah al-Hadith it means mattasala sanaduhu marfu'an ila an-nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So again, Musnad is just another word for marfu', meaning that which hadith whose sanad connects directly to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and is elevated in that sense. For example, in Sahih al-Bukhari, the hadith where al-Bukhari says, "Haddathana Abdullah ibn Yusuf." Abdullah ibn Yusuf narrated to us from Malik, from Abu Zinad, from Al-A'raj, from Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Dha sharbul kalbi fi ina'i ahadikum falyaghsilhu sab'an." That if a dog drinks from any goblet of yours, then wash it 7 times. هذا حديث اتصل سنده من أوله إلى منتهاه وهو مرفوع إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So it's connected. So musnad, muttasil, same thing. Connected all the way back to the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم. Again, he differentiates it from muttasil in this sense that so ittisal, he says in the dictionary, it's opposite of inqita, which means connected. متصل سنده مرفوعا كان أو موقوفا على ما كان. So for example, hadith, the difference between hadith musnad and hadith muttasil. So this musnad is the chain goes all the way back to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In hadith muttasil, the chain can go back to the sahabi, but the sahabi can describe the act of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So hadith can be mawquf in a sense that it goes back to the sahabi. Or for example, Ibn Umar, who's the sahabi, saying that so and so. أنه قال كذا, for example, this is what the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam did. But again, this will be hukm al-marfu. It will be like a marfu hadith. So for example, مثال متصل المرفوع, Malik narrates from Ibn Shihab, who narrates from Salim ibn Abdullah, who narrates from his father, Al-Abdullah, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So the father of Abdullah was Ibn Umar, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam أنه قال كذا, and متصل الموقوف بمالك النافع عن ابن عمر أنه قال كذا. هل يسمى قول التابعي متصلا? Okay, can you say a tabi'i's saying is متصل? حافظ العراقي says وأما أقوال التابعين إذا اتصلت الإسناد إليهم فلا يسمونها متصلة في حالة الإطلاق، أما مع التقدير فجائز، وواقع في كلامهم كقولهم هذا متصل إلى سعيد بن المسيب أو إلى الزهري أو إلى مالك ونحو ذلك. قيل والنكتة في ذلك أنها تسمى مقاتي، فإطلاق المتصل عليها كالوصف لشيء واحد بمتضادين لغة. So again, this is just talking about can a tabi'i, can his saying be called muttasil? And for example, it says هذا متصل إلى سعيد بن المسيب ثم المصنف said that أو إلى الزهري, then this is just, you know, a type of munqati, but it's muttasil according to them. It's not in the technical meaning as we use the word muttasil. The technical meaning as we use the word muttasil is a chain going all the way back to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But if someone later down the line says this is muttasil until, for example, Ahmed, but the Messenger, but they can use it just to say it's connected, but they're not using it in the technical sense, they're just using it in the linguistic sense. So this is one second. Okay, now we go on to az-ziyadatu thiqat. Az-ziyadat. So ziyadatu thiqat means the additions of a trustworthy and reliable narrator. So what does that actually mean? Az-ziyadatu jam'u ziyadatin wa thiqatu jam'u thiqatin. So ziyadat is the plural of ziyada, which means an addition, and thiqat is the plural of thiqa, which means trustworthy. Wa thiqatu huwa al-adlu al-dhabitu. And a trustworthy person is a person who is upright and a person who has a good memory. precision. والمراد بزيادة الثقة ما نراه زائدا من الألفاظ في رواية بعض الثقات حديث مع ما رواه الثقات الآخرون لذلك الحديث. For example, one trustworthy, reliable narrator narrates a particular hadith. Another trustworthy, reliable narrator narrates the same hadith, but one of them has an addition, an extra word, or an extra two words than the other one. Now what do? Both of them are authentic, right? And this is different from shadh, because shadh is someone who narrates this hadith, right? And they are narrating different from someone who's more authentic than them, right? Then obviously you'd accept the authentic one and you leave this person's one, right? Because obviously this hadith is shadh, meaning someone else who's more authentic than them narrates it in a particular way. You disregard the least authentic one. But in this case, ziyadat al-thiqat is where you have two thiqa chains, two people who are trustworthy in their narrations, and they are narrating it.
So there's no difference. It's just that there's an addition.
There's an addition. There's difference. If someone's got an extra word in, I'll give you an example. I know what you're trying to say, but there's a difference. For example, you have
I was trying to say there's no difference in the sections that are the same.
oh yeah, there's no obviously there's no difference in the sections that are the same, but in one of them there's an extra addition. Yeah. I get what you're trying to say now. There's no difference in the sections that are the same, but there's an addition. So the hadith is the same hadith, but you have an extra, chain. And this is different from ziyada fil sanad. So you have ziyada fil isnad, ziyada fil sanad. I forgot to mention, again, I was meant to mention in the beginning about hadha hadithun sahihul isnad. So when someone says, and this is like famously when people send text messages and they say, this is a hadith with an authentic chain.
Yeah.
Is that the same as saying this is an authentic hadith? What do you think?
I don't think so.
Is that the same? When someone says this hadith has an authentic chain, is that the same as saying this hadith is authentic?
Yes.
Yes, one vote for yes. How many votes for no?
Yes.
2 votes for no and 2 don't know. 2 are neutral.
Democracy.
Is the democracy? Yes, no. So what do we say?
Look at the authenticity. Look at the chain.
Yeah, the chain is authentic.
So if the chain is authentic, then of course the hadith is authentic, right?
Because you weren't here for the first few lessons, didn't it?
Is it?
That's why you missed this.
Well, like last year.
Let's see. Yeah. So let's see. Some of the scholars, for example, As-Suyuti says in Tadrib al-Rawi, this is the ada, this is the way or the habit of Al-Hakim in his book Al-Mustadrak. He always says this hadith is Sahih al-Isnad. This hadith is an authentic chain. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala says a muhaddith wouldn't say that. For example, if a hadith was Sahih al-Isnad, if a hadith was Sahih, the muhaddith would just say straight, this hadith is authentic hadith. But the muhaddith, the reason why he would say this is Sahih al-Isnad, it must be for a reason why he's differentiating between the two. And the reality is they're not the same. Because a hadith with an authentic chain can be shadh, can have illah inside. It can be that this is authentic, but someone more authentic narrates a hadith which contradicts this. It can be this hadith is contradicting Naya. Just because the chain is correct, because there's so many hadith. For example, Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, he narrates this hadith about fasting on a Friday. And he said this hadith reaches him with an authentic chain. Fasting, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to fast on a Friday. But he goes, I'm going to reject that. Despite it being, muttasil, musnad, sahihul isnad, everyone in the chain of narration is an authentic person because, people who are narrating it to him don't act upon it. And he goes, it's not from, if the people of, he had another principle about the amal of the people of Medina. If the people of Medina weren't acting upon it, the ulama of Medina who taught him the hadith, then there must be a reason why they're not doing it. The reason could be, there's several reasons. It could be this was the practice of the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the beginning and later he left it. So it's mansukh. It could be this is for a specific circumstance, and a few times you did it just to show it's permissible. So there's many reasons. Sahihul isnad, authentic in terms of transmission, the way it reached us.
You can still fast on a Friday if you're fasting on the preceding day or the day after.
Yeah,
You can't
even
just
for single out every Friday. For example, you should single out a Thursday, you should single out Monday.
Yeah.
The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Sahih Muslim, he was asked, why did you fast? Why do you fast?
That's the rewards.
Yeah. So he said,
I mean,
he said that about the Thursday, about the Monday. Why? What did he say?
Because Monday, he was born on Monday.
So ila Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam an wajhi siyamihi yawm ithnain, or about Monday, since Sahih Muslim said, "Dhaka yawmin wulidtu fihi." That was the day I was born.
Yeah.
मैंने मिलाद की celebrate करते हुए fast करता हूँ, celebrating the Mawlid. So he fasted, celebrate the Mawlid by fasting on a Monday. This is what people use, celebrating. Allah Ta'ala had a separate discussion. The reason why the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was asked, why are you fasting for? He said, because I was born on this day. That's why I'm fasting. So, in a way, he's...
So I don't subscribe to the Mawlid. Or Mawlid. What is it? Mawlid or Mawlid?
Mawlid.
Okay, in my part of India, we call it Mawlid.
Mawlud is similar. Mawlud is someone who's born. Mawlid, Milad, different words for it. Milad al-Nabi is a different discussion. We've discussed it before.
This part time of the year, we'll have so many WhatsApp messages and speeches around this and then supporting this.
Yeah. Now Mawlid's actually gone now. Mawlid's finished about 2 months ago.
Yeah, but
around,
This kind of messages trend in WhatsApp.
Trending, yeah. What was it? Okay, for the hadith of... what was it talking about this again? Backtrack.
The fasting on Friday.
Fasting on a Friday, yeah? Fasting on a Friday. So this hadith is what? Sahihul Isnad, but it's not Sahih in terms of acting upon, because another hadith goes against it. So despite it being Sahihul Isnad, Al-Malik says that I'm not going to act upon this hadith, even though, and it could be for many reasons, and this is why, some of the Sahaba, they narrate some hadith, but they don't act upon it themselves. That's a reason for us, or like a proof that this hadith is no longer acted upon. It's mansukh, it's abrogated. And
so why would they continue narrating it if they don't?
It's for preservation. They might have narrated it in the beginning, and it just, for example, Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he was with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam once, with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam on one occasion, and a man comes to him and he said, "O Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if I kiss my wife, does that break my fast?"
Oh yeah, you told me.
Remember I said this hadith? So then all the people that were with him, they're going to transmit this hadith. And later on another man came, does it break my fast? And he gave them two opposite answers. Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala only knew because he was with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam on both occasions. But those Sahaba who were with the people, they would just transmit it as they heard it. Right? And it's still a transmission of the hadith. It's still Sahihul Isnad. Right?
True, yeah.
It's true. And this is why, people get really confused. This hadith, authentic chain, brother, but you're not acting upon it. There's reasons why. We need to look at it. This is why there's need of people who analyze the text of the hadith as well as, the chain of narrations. That's why you need, a full rounded approach, a holistic approach, not just a single-minded,
I've also heard all the hadith of Sahih Bukhari is not authentic. Not all. That is true. Not all the hadith.
Some people will say, now, astaghfirullah, brother. Astaghfirullah. What we need to understand here is the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, not the Messenger, Shafi'i rahimahullah, other people have narrated this. Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali as well as is narrated that La ismata li kitabin ghayra kitabillah. There is no innocence for a book other than the book of Allah. There is no complete authenticity except for the book of Allah. And this is, this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala trying to say, only the book of Allah is saved from error. There is no other book that is free from error except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I was telling the kids before in Maktab, a poem of Rumi who said, the human being has the angel's wings but a donkey's tail. This is obviously a ta'bir of a Sufi poet, but he's saying that, you have angel's wings, you have the ability to reach such high levels, but at the end of the day, you also have a donkey's tail that will bring you down. So, human beings, we aspire for perfection, but we'll never reach perfection. Perfection is only reserved for, the Anbiya, the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He was the perfect example for us. But we will aspire, we will make mistakes, right? But it's all about returning back to Allah. So the point is that, Al-Bukhari in any book, right? It's bound to have some sort of mistakes in it because everyone's human at the end of the day. And even, for example, Ad-Daraqutni did point out, some in Sahih al-Bukhari, some chains are not authentic because, it might be a mistake from Bukhari. But that doesn't negate Bukhari being such a great book in the eyes of Allah. Like the scholars say, As-Sahhul Kitab Ba'da Kitabillah, the most authentic book after the book of Allah. Right? So it being the most authentic book after the book of Allah doesn't mean it's completely free from mistakes. Could be a mistake in there. This famous hadith about, the monkey, hadith about the monkey in Bukhari, where one of the Sahaba was going past a monkey, and the monkey was stoning, one of the monkeys was stoning the other monkeys because he did zina. First of all, how do you know? This isn't Sahih al-Bukhari. It might sound a bit funny. This isn't Sahih al-Bukhari. Sahih al-Bukhari, brother, why are you acting upon it? One of them. But
so what's the hadith?
So the hadith is, the monkeys were doing rajam to another monkey.
Okay.
The scholars did tanqeed of this. They said, this how. First of all, animals are not subject to Sharia.
Yeah.
Second of all, how do you know the monkeys were stoning the other monkey because he did zina? How do you know that? Can you speak the monkey's language? No, it was one of them. So this is the kind of tanqeed they do. That was just tanqeed in terms of actual hadith, right? And then there's a few hadith about, in Sahih al-Bukhari as well, the Prophet ﷺ, he was married to one of his wives when he was in the state of ihram. This is a disagreement in between the scholars. Some people say you're allowed to get married when you're in the state of ihram. But this hadith is Sahih al-Bukhari, right? Where, where the Messenger ﷺ got married, nikah in the state of ihram. Right, and then some of the Sahaba said no.
No, what is not allowed is just the relation. Right?
Yeah. So that's how some scholars interpret it. But some scholars say no, bilkul mutlaqan, absolutely you're not allowed. And then they say this hadith meant something else, or this hadith is inauthentic. This is how this is. So this is 2 examples I've given you. There's a few examples as well in terms of chain of narrations where
I just got a YouTube recommendation about this. So.
Yeah, check it out. I mean, it's a topic, that needs to be discussed as well, about Al-Bukhari and his Sahih as well. What was the purpose of Al-Bukhari? People narrate this hadith in Bukhari, it's a more authentic book, but the purposes of Bukhari was to prove things. That's why Sahih al-Bukhari came about. He bought his Sahih to prove certain fiqhi points. It wasn't just an innocuous collection of hadith, because other people have done that. He's done that in other places as well. Even, for example, if someone says narrated by Al-Bukhari, that doesn't mean it's completely authentic, because it can be narrated in Al-Bukhari in other books. It can be Bukhari in Adab al-Mufrad, in the Tarikh al-Kabir. Bukhari has other books as well. So it could be, if someone said narrated by Al-Bukhari, it doesn't mean authentic straight away, because we know Al-Bukhari.
Everything in Sahih al-Bukhari is
for the most part. Like I said, there could be some exceptions. For the most part, yes. Compared to, because his objective was that, he was a great scholar. His objective was to collect Sahih narrations to prove things from, right? So going back to Ziyadat al-Thiqat. Friday, yeah. So again, they didn't, act upon it, and there's several examples of this, not acting upon what you narrated. It could be, for example, Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he narrates from the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Oh, see, 30 already. He narrates from the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam never used to pray on the camel, right? Sorry, he used to pray witr on the camel. The Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used to pray witr on the camel. However, people around Ibn Umar noticed that he used to get off the camel and pray the witr. Yeah, so he's narrating something and he's doing something else. So this is, for example, some scholars use this as abrogated. Yeah, so saying the first one is abrogated. This is found as well by Imam Hakim in the Mustadrak. So going back to the topic, زيادة الثقات. So هذه زيادات من بعض الثقات في بعض الأحاديث. Okay. Okay, some scholars are مكان وقوع تقع زيادات في المتن كما تقع في السند. So you can have a ziyada by a sentence or by a word in the hadith, actual hadith, or you can have it in terms of the actual isnad. So some of the hadith might be marfu, the same hadith. Some of the scholars might narrate this hadith as hadith mawquf, or some of them can say it's mursal, and it goes back to the tabi'i, back to the sahabi, back to the messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So there's a difference in between this. حكم الزيادة في المتن. أما زيادة في المتن فقد اختلف العلماء في حكمها على أقوال. Some people just accept the ziyada of a thiqa. So if you're thiqa, you narrate the same hadith. In your hadith, you add an extra word. Some of the scholars, they completely accepted this blindly, and Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi mentions Al-Kifaya. This is the way of Ibn Hibban, this is the way of Imam Hakim, this is the way of Al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala, and this is the way of Nawawi mentioned in Sahih Muslim. This is the way of Imam Nawawi mentioned in Sharh Sahih Muslim, and from the way that Imam Muslim writes his Sahih, we can understand this to be the position of Imam Muslim as well. And Hafiz ibn Hazm rahimahullah ta'ala al-Zahiri says this is the most authentic opinion, and the proofs for this are the proofs that we use for accepting a khabr al-wahid, a single narration. So I'm going to give you examples for this as well. So we have some of the scholars who completely accept this, some of them who completely reject it. There's a second school, and some of them who some of the scholars who accept the hadith of the scholar who narrated it first, who narrated it second, and reject the hadith from the scholar who narrated it second. What do I mean by that? So this science of ziyadat al-thiqa is like it's a whole science in and of itself inside Mustalah al-Hadith, to such an extent that Ibn Hibban rahimahullah ta'ala said about Ibn Khuzaymah that there's no one like him when it comes on the face of the earth, when it comes to just this subspeciality of ziyadat al-thiqa. So ziyadat al-thiqa is a subspeciality in and of itself of Mustalah al-Hadith, finding out extras and additions and additions and minuses in chains. So additions and subtractions in chains. Some of the scholars accepted it blankly, some of the scholars didn't accept it, some of the scholars accepted the person who narrated it second over the person who narrated it first. For example, so in a majlis of hadith, I'm a hadith scholar, you narrate this hadith from me, and it goes back and it becomes sahih. You also narrate this hadith from me. You narrated it from me in, for example, 20th year after Hijrah. You narrated it from me 30th year after the Hijrah. You narrated it with an extra word, right? You narrated it with that word missing. So I would accept yours because you came later, you heard it from me later. This is some of the scholars said. Some of the scholars said it could be the case that the narrator himself, he forgot and he just added it. So it could be the first time he added it, the second time he forgot. It could be a mistake from him, right? The third scenario could be that, this scholar of hadith, he's narrating the hadith, you sat really close to me, you sat really far from me. So you heard the extra word, you just missed the extra word because you're too far. That could be the case. Could be the case that, you yourself, added the extra word because you heard it from another hadith scholar like this. So you are writing the hadith and you just added it by accident because the hadith is also like this. It could be that the hadith scholar is narrating it and he said there's two wordings. One is additional wording, one is the wording taken out, right? This could also be the case, right? So there's several scenarios, and how do you find out which is correct? Comparison. This is the only way you can compare with different chains, and you see did one person is an isolated person and the rest of them narrating it in such a way, then obviously you'd go with the majority because he must have heard it wrong. And I give you examples of this, so many examples regarding that. For example, Aflaha wa abihi, he will be successful and his father will be successful. That one of the scholars narrated like that. If he's lying, so a person who came to the messenger said, I'm not going to do anything else except for, pray 5 times a day, fast. I'm not going to do extra nafil. I'm not going to do any extra nafil. Prophet ﷺ said, him and his father will be successful, right? In some of the narrations, most of the other narrations said that he will be successful. Aflaha wallahi. He will be successful. But some of them heard أفلح وأبيه. Only a single person heard أفلح وأبيه, but it's still Sahih al-Isnad, right? Because he's both Sahih, but it's just a mishearing. It could be he misheard. So وقد قسم الزيادة بحسب قولها وردها إلى 3 أقسام: تقسيم الحسن وافق عليه النووي وغيره. هذا التقسيم زيادة ليس فيها منافى لما رواه الثقات الأوثق، فهذه حكمها القبول لأنها كحديث تفرد برواية جملته ثقة من الثقات. For example, if you narrate a hadith, both of you are ثقة, you narrate this hadith, go back, both are Sahih hadith, and one person narrates it with the ziyada, you would accept the ziyada. This is this opinion, the first opinion, because if you narrated this hadith and he wasn't even there, I would still accept it because you're thiqa. There's no reason why I shouldn't accept it. You understand? So this is one group. Again, if it goes, if it's not going against, because some hadith it can change the meaning completely if you add an extra word. I'll give you an example of that. But زيادة منافية لما رواه الثقات والأثر فهذه حكمه الرد كما سبق في الشاذ. So this shadh hadith is when you are narrating, you are both thiqa. You are more thiqa than him, right? He narrates this hadith with a word that contradicts the hadith that you're narrating. I would accept your narration. Why? Because you're more thiqa than him. And that's shadh, the discussion on shadh. Okay, then you have taqeed al-mutlaq, takhsis al-aam. Okay, so examples now. So this will make it clear, and then we'll do, what time is it?
36.
So what time do you have to go? 45. Okay, we'll finish in 5 minutes, inshallah. أمثلة لزيادة في المتن. So for example, in the hadith of Sahih Muslim, إذا ولغ الكلب في إناء أحدكم فليغسله 7 مرار فتكون هذه زيادة كخبر تفرد به على ابن مسعود وهو ثقة فتقبل تلك الزيادات. Okay, so in some hadith it says فليرقه في حديث ولغ الكلب. Okay, so in the hadith I mentioned to you before about where a dog drank from a basin, wash it 7 times, right? This is it. In another variant of the same hadith, it says and chuck the water away. فليرفقه. Then you need to chuck the water away. زيادة.
So no need to wash it 7 times.
No, it says da and it says فليرقه.
I mean, if you wash it, let it.
Yeah, arqa yurqi, what does it mean? Does it mean to break or to wash? Ya Arab, what is yurqi? فليرقه, what does it mean? فليرقه. It's an old word, quite common. It's one of those. فليرقه. It just means زيادة كلمة فليرقه في حديث ولوغ الكلب ولم يذكرها سائر الحفاظ من أصحاب الأعمش. I'll check that for next time. I'll check what it means. I didn't check. زيادة يوم عرفة في حديث يوم عرفة ويوم النحر وأيام التشريق عيدنا أهل الإسلام وهي أيام أكل وشرب وفي رواية بعال. So the day of Arafah, the day of Nahar, the day of sacrifice, the days of Tashriq, which come with the days of sacrifice, the few days of Eid, 5 days. Eiduna Ahlul Islam, our Eid, the people of Islam, وهي أيام, and these are the days of eating, of drinking, these are the days of eating and drinking, right? فإن الحديث من جميع طرقه بدونها. So someone added the day of Arafah. So the day of Arafah, the day of Eid, and the days of Tashriq, which are the 3 days. In some of the narrations, the Arafah isn't there. It's just the day of Eid and the 3 days. Ayyam al-Tashriq, our Eid. Because obviously in the day of Arafah we fast, right? فإن الحديث من جميع طرقه بدونها وإنما جاء بها موسى بن علي بن رباح عن أبيه عن عقبة بن عامر والحديث أخرج الترمذي وأبو داود وغيرهما. So Musa ibn Ali ibn Abi Rabah, from his father, from Uqba ibn Amir. This is the only person who narrates this hadith including the day of Arafah, and this hadith is mentioned in Tirmidhi Sharif and Abu Dawud Sharif. مثال للزيادة التي فيها نوع منافات. So this is an example of things that contradict each other. It's a hadith of Sahih Muslim where the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reported to have said وَجُعِلَتْ لَنَا الْأَرْضُ كُلُّهَا مَسْجِدًا وَجُعِلَتْ تُرْبَتُهَا لَنَا طُهُورًا. The whole earth has been made a masjid for us, and the soil is made pure for us. فقد تفرد أبو مالك الأشجعي بزيادة تربتها ولم يذكرها غيره من الرواة وإنما رووا الحديث هكذا وجعلت الأرض مسجدا وطهورا. So the earth has been made a masjid for us, and the soil has been made pure for us. The soil had been made pure. Extra sentence added to this hadith by a person called Abu Malik al-Ashja'i. He just added this turbatu word, but the other narrations only mentioned جُعِلَتْ لَنَا الْأَرْضُ مَسْجِدًا وَطُهُورًا من Sahih Muslim. An example of ziyada fil isnad. So this is when you have ta'arud being mawsul or mursal. Mawsul connected to the messenger, or if it stops at the tabi'i, at the tabi'i. تعارض الرفع مع الوقف, or if it's the messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم. أما باقي صور الزيادات في الإسناد فقد أفرد العلماء لها أبحاث خاصة مثل المزيد في الأسانيد. وقد اختلف العلماء في قبول الزيادة وردها على 4 أقوال. So for example, الحكم لمن وصله أو رفعه أي قبول الزيادة وهو قول جمهور الفقهاء والأصوليين. For example, you have الحكم لمن وصله أو رفعه. So if you have ziyada in the sanad, you would say that this hadith is a mawsul hadith. This hadith is a mawsul hadith, meaning it goes back towards the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If there's a conflict between it being mawsul and marfu, i.e. the addition, then you would say that this goes back to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as in the extra information in the hadith. And this is the opinion of most of the fuqaha of usuliyin. For example, Al-Ghazali in Mustasfa and other At-Tirmidhi rahimahullah ta'ala and others. Then al-hukm lil-akthar wa huwa qawlu ba'di ashab al-hadith. Al-hukm lil-ahfaz wa huwa qawlu ba'di ashab al-hadith. And then you have what the majority said. If the majority said this is mawsul, they will accept it mawsul. If the majority said this is maqtu, accept it maqtu. And then we have al-hukm lil-ahfaz wa huwa qawlu ba'di ashab al-hadith. And then the opinion that, the most authentic of the narrator, the ahfaz of the narrator, we accept this from them. And ومثاله حديث, an example is hadith لا نكاح إلا بولي, there is no nikah except with a wali. فقد رواه يونس عن ابن أبي إسحاق السبيعي, ابن أبي إسحاق السبيعي, and Yunus, the son of Abu Ishaq al-Sabi'i, and then his grandson Israel وقيس ibn Rabi' and Abi Ishaq musnadan muttasilan. So Abu Ishaq al-Sabi'i is the narrator. His son Yunus narrates from him in one way, right? La nikaha illa bi waliyin. This is, the saying of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam in one way, and the other group, Sufyan al-Thawri narrates from Shu'bah from Abu Ishaq, the same narrator, where he says this is hadith mursal, so it goes back to the tabi'i, right? It doesn't go back to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is just an example of of ziyada fil isnad, and inshallah we'll call it a day from there. And I think next time we'll just do follow-up narrations where you have a weak narration and how that's strengthened by other narrations. You have a weak narration, and when would that be the case? And if there's so many weak hadith, how do they give strength to each other? When do they give strength to each other? Because it's only when you have people who, the reason why the hadith is weak, it's not because the person is a liar, it's because they had weak in memory, or sometimes they used to forget, or they had this later on they became weak. So these are how different da'if hadith give strength to each other. So that's the next discussion, and then after that the Mustalah al-Hadith is complete, and it's just a few points. I think, should we finish off this book? There's a few points about hadith here.
Yeah,
There's a few there's a few points about hadith, in general.
Okay.
When a father narrates from his son, this sort of thing. When a person has the same name, this sort of thing. When an older person narrates from a younger person, there's some interesting points. I think we'll talk about that, and then after that we'll discuss from there together.